Welcome to this month's edition of Pulp Nonfiction, the paper and packaging podcast. I'm Greg Johnson with Sustana Fiber, and I'm here once again with my co-host, Dr. Marta Pazos. So, Marta, it's good seeing you again. And isn't it good seeing all the brands that are starting to embrace more and more paper-based packaging in 2022?
Yes, I am so happy to be here today and so thankful for our guest today, too. So, during our recordings, I've been learning more and more about the paper industry. But the more you learn, the more you realize how little you know and how much more you want to know about a certain topic. And also, as you know, plastics are what I studied in school, and I believe that the uses of plastics, although they have been really key in order for our human development, right? We have turned them into a misuse. So this single-use packaging, made of plastic, has made us realize that while plastics can be used in certain applications, in some others we should consider other materials such as paper, which is becoming more and more prominent in the food beverage industry and in others too, right? Like some cosmetics brands are already using paper packaging. So today our guest, I'm hoping that we're going to get a little more light into that progression and where the industry is taking us.
Exactly, Marta. And what better way to explore paper's place in today's marketplace than with our guest today, Mary Anne Hansan, the president of the Paper and Packaging Board. Mary Anne has excelled as a creative communications leader throughout her career. Prior to being named the president of the Paper and Packaging Board, she promoted flowers, seafood, and even plastics while working for the Society of American Florists, the National Fisheries Institute, and the American Plastics Council, as well as at several advertising and public relations agencies. Founded in 2014, the Paper and Packaging Board is based in McLean, Virginia, just outside Washington, D.C. Composed of almost 50 member mills and distributors, the organization is operated under the direction of the United States Department of Agriculture and is well known for its How Life Unfolds marketing campaign. Started in 2015, the campaign spotlights paper and packaging's prominent place in today's economy and how paper encourages creativity, communication, and connection. Mary Anne, it's great to see you. We're grateful for your time today, and thank you for visiting with us.
Hey, thanks for inviting me to the Sustana podcast. I can't wait to tell you a little bit about what we're doing with the Paper and Packaging Board.
Marianne, thank you so much for being with us today. One of the things I love about recording this podcast, besides having a lot of fun with Greg, is how much more I get to know about everything, right? In general, particularly regarding the paper packaging, sustainability, environmentally friendly practices. But, that's the general thing. But I am fascinated to get to know people that I didn't even know that there would be um, doing the amazing type of job that you're doing. So tell us a little more about your leadership role as the president of the Paper and Packaging Board, as well as a little about your background and how you got to where you are today.
Well, how much time do you have? No, I'm just kidding. But
We'll edit it, so we have plenty of time.
no, well, I've been involved in really industry commodity marketing programs for most of my career. While I was a political science major in college, my first job was in an advertising agency, and as they say, the rest is history. I got into advertising and worked at a number of firms, and then eventually went client side. But the programs that I've been involved in are all of this same kind of nature, which is their category building. It's a rising tides lifts all boats kind of initiative. And so I've worked in probably very seriously half a dozen and even more beyond that. So, I'll tell my friends that I started off in flowers and I worked in the floral industry for 9 years. And everybody thinks, oh, that's fun and beautiful, and it is, but it's also a perishable product. And so once it's gone, right, that's a lot of profit out the door. And so they really had to work hard to get people to buy flowers for more than just gifts. And then over time, I worked in the plastics industry. Then I worked in the seafood industry. That was the most recent position I had before doing this, specifically for canned tuna, and helping pregnant women understand that seafood was a really critical part of a pregnancy diet for baby brain development. And there was a lot of misinformation in the marketplace that we had to square away. Fast forward 8 years, I've been now at the Paper and Packaging Board. And what really got me excited is this industry was really serious about making an impact in the marketplace, getting the forest story out, getting the recycling story out. When we first started, we were working really with products and product benefits. But over the last couple of years, as that consumer environment has started to shift and change, our board shifted our program to 100% sustainability focus. But overall, I've worked in these types of programs now, both agency and client side, well over 35 years.
So, I mean, it is fascinating to hear that. I gotta tell you that, and I tell people this all the time. When I first came to this country, and it was the same everywhere else in the world, but I guess that it was what made me think about it. Paper was sort of the evil material, right? Because it was contributing to deforestation. So, kudos to people like yourself that have straightened that message and have made people understand that by replenishing the resources that we take, we are actually not causing more of the damage that we currently are, right? So again, thanks for not only the work that you're doing, but also strengthening the message to all of us, right? For all of us.
Yeah, no, it's really been a wonderful journey, and the a lot has changed. I think the internet, was everybody knows that was a game changer. But I remember, printing out every important message, right? And there was a lot more paper used with the advent of the internet and emails. But over time, and particularly with the introduction of the smartphone, a lot of people are not printing as much, though they're printing what they want to print. And so there's definitely been a big change in the digital world that has impacted people's, I think, view about the resources that we have. But I also think there's been a better um, job being done here by our companies and programs like ours that are talking about the forest story in the United States, which is really very different than what's going on in the rest of the world. And that's not to say there aren't problems or challenges that we all need to address. But the US can be part of solving the global deforestation problem, right? By sharing by example and showing how healthy markets for forest products really incentivize landowners to replant trees. And so our companies work very closely with a lot of these private landowners to put back more trees than they use. And so that whole reuse of the material, recycling, the planting, the regenerating, all of those things, I think, have started to help shift the market in the United States. So those email campaigns, do you remember, those messages? Please consider the environment before you
Yeah.
print this
Before
message.
you pray.
That goes
Yeah.
way back to, again, like the internet was new. You wanted to save those messages, right? Because we were used to having a paper trail. And of course, a lot of that has changed and continues to change. So technology has been a big driver, but the behavior of our companies has also been a really, really important part of evolving, how we look at the world. And like I said, it's not to say there aren't other challenges here in the U.S. to our forests, like urbanization. We know climate change is an issue, and so we have to work on those things as well. But in terms of replacing and replanting at rates higher than what we use, that's been a hallmark of the industry's success, on the forest product side.
Certainly, certainly, Mary Ann. That reminds me of an organization I just learned about recently called Tree Plenish that's based in Massachusetts. Are you familiar with them?
I'm not. And I
They
grew up in Massachusetts. I'm going to have to write that one down.
Yeah, I apparently it was started by some college students, and I believe last year they planted over 50,000 trees, and they were just trying to address some of the issues that we just talked about. But let me ask you this: another question for you, Mary Ann. In terms of sustainability, from both a professional as well as a personal standpoint, what do you do in your everyday life to help the environment? Could you tell us a few things that you do?
Sure. Well, as the leader of the Paper and Packaging Board and our total sustainability focus, we're talking about how to advance that messaging and get that message out in the marketplace every day. Personally, I am that individual who likes to brag that my recycling bin is fuller than my trash bin, because we're avid recyclers, and I'm in Fairfax County, Virginia, and we have a very robust recycling program here, and so there's very little that we use that doesn't end up in the recycling. And we do have challenges. Glass is definitely more difficult to take, and that gets recycled special somewhere else. And then of course the various kinds of plastics. But again, at the end of the day, I'm the person that's saying I feel good because my recycling is fuller than my trash. And the other thing is, especially around the holidays, or when you see these sort of Christmas in July kind of sales, I'll be out walking the dog, and I will see people who just threw their boxes out. They didn't empty them. They didn't flatten them. And, that stuff is not going to end up in a recycling stream. And so there's part of me that wants to run over and just, cut the tape on the box and flatten it. So we do try and evangelize, people. And, even our own office, we brought in the waste management group that handles the recycling for our building to talk about the training they do with the other offices in the building, because we see all these boxes out of people's offices at night when we go home, and we sort of have that same question consumers have, which is it really getting recycled? And so the answer is yes, and we've seen the materials they use to educate the different suites in our building. So I am kind of a hawk that way. Even at work, if I see something in the trash that should be in the recycling bin, I have no qualms about moving it to the right spot.
That's great. That you are totally dedicated, and I heard recently that apparently 68% of all paper products are recycled, which is tremendous. I think that's the highest recycling rate we've seen, especially compared to other materials like Marta and I have talked about
Many
for a
times.
long time, like plastics.
Mhm.
So good job. I That's very impressive.
Yeah, I think the
Yeah.
industry has done a good job reminding consumers, but there's so much more we can do. We've got a new labeling initiative that our companies can go to their customers and ask them to put that on the box. And it has a QR code with all kinds of information about recycling. But the message is really cool. It says this box has up to seven lives. Our planet has one. And then it says empty, flatten, recycle. And we're starting to see some momentum from our company's customers in terms of putting that on the box. And we're asking them to think about putting it on an inside flap so that the consumer sees it when they open the box. So we're looking at point of sale initiatives like that to remind people, at curbside, to recycle, empty the boxes, flatten them, and recycle. And we're starting to get more involved in communicating the fact that pizza boxes are recyclable. Our mills all take them, but the local municipalities haven't quite gotten the message. And so we're looking at a whole initiative around pizza boxes, maybe around Super Bowl, March Madness, and family game night time, to again kind of remind people that this great food also comes in a great material in terms of being able to recycle it. But you do have to take the food out of it, right? So
Sure.
consumers need those reminders.
Right. No pepperoni with that paper for
Exactly.
sure.
No pizza
Right.
crust.
No
You
pizza
know,
Right.
crust.
to me, the pizza crust looks exactly like the cardboard. That's why I don't eat it. But not to be put there. And I actually have to say, Marianne, that I'm one of those people that find flattening those boxes and like smashing them extremely, how would I put it, stress relieving.
Yeah.
It's like one of those activities of like, there is something about destroying that it is kind of like soothing. I mean, no judgment, please, but I'm sure that a lot of people feel the same
Yeah.
way, right? I actually had the privilege to go a few years ago to the cornfields area of Illinois, where there is a few companies that are manufacturing or they are processing corn syrup, and they are actually using the husks
Hmm.
to as a potential feedstock for paper, right? Like, where do you see where do you see advancements in the paper industry, right? Like, we have, like you mentioned at the beginning, it's a commodity which has become almost like a downgraded word. But there's so much research going on. Where do you see the paper industry going in to continue helping with this um, conservationism, right, of our planet?
Yeah, so that's, I think, a double-edged sword. That's my opinion. You certainly want to see innovation with other materials. But again, we know here in the United States, the key to keeping forests as forests is to make sure that they have a useful life, right? And that useful life comes from everything from lumber. It isn't just, paper and packaging, but there are many, many things that are made from the forest. And so while it's nice to think about conservation in that way, conservation doesn't necessarily help us achieve our goal, right? Which is to keep our forest lands really robust and healthy. And so I don't have anything negative to say about these agricultural alternatives, especially when they utilize other kinds of waste. But I do think it's really important to remember that our forests are really meant to be working for us. And when they're working and they're working for us, that incentivizes a whole chain of reactions, starting with landowners, right, to continue to invest in planting and growing more trees. I think where our industry is really, really strong is in innovating out waste. And so, almost everything, right, that we buy is at some point shipped in a box. And so, if we can do that smarter, more efficiently, right, we can resize boxes to take more, we can use less fiber to make it because it's strong enough, with the fiber it has. These are all things that I know our companies are really thoughtful about, innovating out waste, using more material than we need, right? We want to use our products smartly and efficiently. And so that's been a really important area for the industry. And then we have seen things like detergent boxes, right, that are replacing the plastic, a jug, if you will, and but there's still a plastic liner, just like a coffee cup, needed, right, to make sure that that product integrity remains in place. And so I do think we're going to see more and more paper-based packaging around health and beauty products, particularly organic brands, because that's very consistent with their market and positioning.
Mary Anne, as a follow up to Marta's previous question, I know you're aware that Sistana's recycled fiber is added to all kinds of sustainable food and beverage packaging, from paper cups and carry-out containers to sandwich wraps and even microwavable sleeves. What promotional programs does the board have in place or have you considered for promoting recycled fiber, PCR?
So we are in our promotions around reuse of fiber. We are talking with consumers about the fact that paper products are recyclable, but we know they don't really know what happens, and so we have a whole set of videos and other print ads and things like that that really tell that circularity story. That your a vaccine box becomes a shipping box, becomes a Kleenex box, becomes. And so consumers understand that when they recycle, right, their recycling turns into other things. So we don't talk specifically about how much recycled content is in any given thing, but we do educate consumers that when you recycle, those fibers get used up to 7 times to make other different products. And that's really how we're getting that story out.
That's great. Fantastic. I think consumers have a yearning to know about those things. They want to do the right thing, and it sounds like you're kind of steering them in the right direction.
Yeah, no, we really are trying to make them excited and confident that their recycling is making a difference. It's interesting. I've seen research. I think it was a recycling partnership where there's almost this like sense of civic responsibility when it comes to recycling, and so we want to appeal to those sensibilities. And we want to make it easy for them, and so this is where I'm excited too about the advancements being made in recycling.
Mary Ann, in terms of marketing, I know you've created some really clever campaigns revolving around the board's sustainability story, both in print and PR, about how life unfolds. And what was really interesting to me was your program, Faces of the Forest, a video series that you put together. Could you tell us a little bit about that program and how it came about?
Sure. So authenticity is a huge driver behind storytelling, and most good brands today are really focused on not just one way communication, but really creating a dialogue with people. And so, what we thought would really make a lot of sense is to start looking at some of these foresters across all the different wood baskets in the United States and tell us their story, their story of land ownership, how they got that land, how they take care of it. And we work with the American Forest Foundation to identify these foresters all over the United States. So we're actually going on our eighth video this year. And the goal was just for them to tell us in their own words what it means to be a forest landowner and both the responsibilities, the challenges, and even the resources. We had a mother daughter team. This was one of my favorites from North Carolina. They inherited this land from their family, and they didn't have any real background in land ownership. And so North Carolina has this incredible forestry program and services, and they came out and they helped the Gray family write a forest management plan. And so the industry is incredibly robust in that way, really having these great local networks and resources. And so it was just a nice way to let consumers hear from the owners of the land themselves that they're not in it to just clear cut it and get a bunch of money and walk away, that there's a real preservation mentality among landowners to do the right thing.
It seems like, though, the tide has turned, and paper now is considered much more acceptable. What do you think accounted for that shift in public opinion, and what can the board do to continue to reinforce this shift and acceptance, if you will, of paper?
I think we certainly hit a low during COVID in how much paper we were using because people weren't going to work. They weren't going into the office, schools, churches, conventions, conferences. My husband's in commercial printing, and the phone didn't ring for 6 months because people weren't going anywhere, and all the support materials that were paper weren't getting used. But I do think what's happened is people have reached a point that they miss that tactile experience. And so you see book sales are on the rise and from an all-time low a couple years ago. And so consumers are really starting to understand that, where they want their paper and how to serve it up. We've seen in our research, consumers get hung up about paper being wasteful when there's paper given to them that they didn't want, right? So this is maybe perhaps a lot of mail for things that they weren't interested in. Okay, and so how we maneuver around that, I think, is an important question. But I think in the space of, again, learning and having really experiential an experiential life, paper just touches so many of the senses. And so again, it's not going to be like it was 25 years ago, but people know that paper's there for them when they want it. When they want an airline ticket printed out, you can do it, right? When you want a chapter for a science experiment at school, you can print it out. So I think it's just having paper more on the terms that they want it when they need it, as opposed to not having it at all.
Well said.
Oh, I'm still, a big fan of writing notes on paper. My house is full with like my little notes to myself, and once you write it, it's more likely you're gonna remember it anyway.
That's right.
I
True.
right, and I still like to have my notebook. I see people with their iPad taking notes in a meeting. I'm like, please.
There's a lot of research that shows that people who are just sitting there typing versus taking notes are not committing that to memory, right? It's actually going into your brain and making connections, when you write it down.
Yeah.
So there is a
Hmm.
lot more data out there to reinforce the value of paper in learning and comprehension. And then this is anecdotal, but if you watch Jimmy Fallon, and he does thank you notes every week, and
Yeah.
so and they're usually, a joke about something, but he's writing on paper and he's taking a minute to think about saying something authentic. And so that isn't any particularly kind of big advertisement, but it does reinforce, that idea that good ideas, right, get written down on paper. So we've got a lot of positivity, I think, in the broader marketplace about paper.
Paper is in the radar as a material of choice, right? However, we all know that fashions come and go, and they tend to circle. Yeah, they tend to cycle. However, we have short span of attention. So, what ideas do you have in mind, or do you have any plans to keep the momentum of these paper at the forefront of circular economy and material of choice to stop this damage that we are causing in generations to come?
So you've touched on a really important topic that's near and dear to our heart, right? This whole idea of circularity and using just what we need. What we have found is we've got a print ad out right now where we take that concept of your paper, your magazine, your box can become right, and we present it in a circular way, and then we have reminders of the forest and that renewable resource that it came from. And that ad is working so powerfully for us because without saying circular, right, consumers are understanding, right, the reuse of the material, the reuse of the fiber, and then they see the forest and they're reminded that it's renewable. And so we are going to be tackling circularity through less about sort of trying to drill into people's heads kind of the exact science of it, and more just implying that through both the reuse of fiber when you recycle it, and then the renewability of forests. And again, reminding consumers that our industry helps put back twice the volume that it uses in any given year. So it isn't just, like I said, literally a science textbook discussion about circularity, but it's about putting all these elements together and presenting them in a way that they understand the naturally circular nature of it. And that's been working really well for us. So we're really on point to try and expand on what we've learned in telling that story. But again, it's nice because you don't have to whack them over the head.
Brilliant. That is totally brilliant.
I need to check it out. I just actually wrote down on a piece of paper, check out the HP commercial.
You took a note on it, Marta. That's
I
good.
did.
You'll remember. Well,
Probably.
Mary Anne, we could go on and on. This has been so fascinating. But as we conclude our conversation with you today, I had one more question.
Sure.
New York Times best-selling author Mark Kalansky, who's written books like Salt and Cod and The Importance of Not Being Earnest, his newest book, wrote a book called Simply Paper in 2016. And in that book, he quoted Harry Gould, who grew Gould paper into one of the 4 largest paper distributorships in the United States in New York. And Harry was quoted as saying, "Paper will probably never disappear." Do you agree with that statement?
I do agree because there's really no substitute, visually or otherwise, for the multi-sensorial experience. There's a whole school of thought out there called haptics, right? And it's all about how you interact, right, with things in your life in multi-dimensional ways. And so paper, you can smell it, you can see it, you can touch it, you can hear it. And so you don't trigger all the senses in a video the way you do when you've got that tactile thing in hand. And so I still think it's going to be a beautiful expression of everything from clothing to things that we want to buy for our home to again reading for information, reading to learn, reading to comprehend.
Mary Anne, it's been a pleasure talking about paper with you. We've learned a lot today, and we can't thank you enough for your time. It was exciting to hear that paper still has a prominent place in today's marketplace, and looks like a promising future as well. But thank you again.
You're very welcome, and definitely have me back in a year or so, and I'll have some results on how things are going with our new sustainability focus.
Certainly.
Oh, I can't wait to hear the follow-up. Thank you so much, Mary Anne.
Great to talk with you both. Take care.